All right, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. My name is Jacquelyn Molina, and I'm a board certified behavior analyst. And welcome to today's talk, Understanding Behavior as Easy as ABC, where I'll go over ABC analysis, what it is, and how this can help you help your students in the classroom. And this will be part one of a longer series. So as a result of this webinar, I hope to give you another tool from your classroom and have you walking away being able to do the following. Identify what ABC analysis is, identify why ABC is needed, and identify the ABC when looking at a situation. So you're probably here because you love working with kids and you want to do all you can to help them in the classroom. So kids are not only the cutest, but the darnest, and they can do some pretty challenging things at times. So it's hard, to figure out how to work through some situations and get them on track. So this ABC analysis that I'm going to go over today is a way to look critically at your students' behavior and determine how to help them turn around that hard time that they're going through. So now, why should we take the time to learn about ABC analysis? Well, if you can know what is motivating someone, you can better understand why they're doing what they're doing. So if someone doing something for the wrong reasons, we can try to change it for the right ones, and more on how to do that in our next part too. So let's get into it. What is ABC analysis? So ABC analysis is a way to break down a situation. You start by identifying what the behavior of interest is, what it is you're looking at and where you want to change, and then look at what happened before and what happened after. So this guides us on understanding what the motivation is for how a child is behaving, and it gets us closer to figuring out the root cause of that behavior. So as I mentioned before, ABC is a three-part breakdown of a situation. The antecedent of a situation is what happens right before the behavior we're concerned about or what we're looking at. This behavior is the action that the student is taking. And the consequence in this situation is what happens right after that action is taken. So let's break this down a little further. So the first letter in ABC refers to antecedent. The antecedent is what happens right before the behavior. So some examples of this could be an instruction that was given, a transition, such as announcing a new subject, or a change in routine in the classroom, such as a fire drill, or maybe there was a class guest. So the B in this three-term tool is for behavior, something that is observable, some type of action that the student is doing that you can see and you can notice it. So some examples are students shouting, ripping up an assignment, or even throwing a pencil. So it's important to look at what is not considered behavior. Sometimes we confuse labels as behavior, such as he is being lazy or she is so smart. So other behaviors that are commonly used are thinking or daydreaming, or even states of being, such as they're hungry or they're tired. So none of these are observable. And they lead to assumptions about, what's motivating the child. So I would suggest you avoid using these terms when you're identifying your students' behaviors. So what does this look like? What does that behavior look like? So what do the words that I mentioned look like in your students? What have you noticed in your students to cause you to say these labels about them? For example, you say your student is smart because you always see her studying long hours before a test. And why do you think this other student is tired? You saw him yawning. And lastly, playing with a pencil is something done by someone you assume is distracted. So all these examples of these words are observable behaviors and not just labels. So look at observable behaviors looking at those observable behaviors helps you better understand behaviors without really assuming the motivation. So let's look at the third and the last part of the ABC analysis, the C. So this is what happens right after that observable behavior. Some examples of this are when you give someone corrective feedback. So you tell them, good job, buddy, or even give them an instruction to go to the office as a result of that disruption in the classroom. So let's go over this example with ABC in mind. So at the top of the slide, you'll see a reminder of what ABC refers to. Antecedent before, the behavior is the action we're looking at, and the consequences after. So in this scenario, Billy is yelling. We want to know why Billy is yelling so we can help him work through this and really stop the disruption in the class. So Billy yelling, right before that, his teacher tells Billy, are you ready for question number 2? Go ahead and read that question. And then bam, he yells. Then right after that, his teacher asks him to go calm down in the corner and come back when he is ready to learn. So Billy's yelling. What is he trying to say with this yelling? So based on him first being asked to do something and then not having to do it by asking him to go calm down, he probably wants to tell us this is too hard for us, too hard for me. I'm tired of working. I'm not motivated to do classwork right now. So in a desired scenario, this is what we would want him to do. So we know he's having some trouble with the work and doesn't want to do it. So what would we want him to do instead? So the original statement is in red, and I changed it here to green to show you what changes would be made when we work on this situation with different behavior analysis techniques. And we change the behavior based on the motivation that we see from our ABC analysis. So in this new situation, Billy says, this is hard. I need help reading this word instead of yelling. And the teacher responds, well, let me help you sound that out for you. Okay, Billy, this is how you say it. Instead of her getting upset, getting frustrated, and asking him to walk away from the task, and ultimately Billy not even doing the task. So let's go ahead and work through this activity together. So the situation is, we have our student Austin. He starts kicking the back of his classmate's chair when Mrs. Stevens asks the class to take out their math textbook. Mrs. Stevens tells Austin to go walk to the bathroom if he needs to stretch his legs. So what is the antecedent in this situation? Our behavior of interest here, what we're looking to change, is the kicking of the chair. So what is the A? What happened right before that? So we see in green was the behavior of interest that I mentioned, kicking the back of the chair, and the antecedent, what happened right before, was Mrs. Stevens asking the class to take out their math textbook. So she was putting some type of instruction, asking him to do something. So now we know our antecedent and we know our behavior. And I have laid it out for you in our chart so you can visually see this A, B, and C. So what is considered the consequence here? So let's think. Remember, what happened before was asked him to take out the book. He started yelling. And then what happened? Mrs. Stevens tells Austin to go walk to the bathroom if he needs to stretch his legs. So let's look at that in our chart so we can better visualize it. So teacher asks student to do something. What does he do? He kicks his chair. Then how does she respond to that? She tells him to leave the classroom and essentially forget about the work that he needs to do. So what could this mean? So Austin bothering his peers so that his teacher can give him the break that he probably needs. So this tells us that whenever Austin has to do work and doesn't necessarily feel like it, he resorts to just bothering his peers, which is very disruptive, and his teacher lets him get out of that situation. So maybe he learns to delay his work a little bit, right? By doing that. So what can we have him do instead? What would be a better way to get out of this situation? So I haven't read what he originally was doing, right? That behavior that we were looking at, him kicking and bothering his classmates. So what would we want him to do instead? Ideally, we would want, as soon as Mrs. Stevens asked him to do something, right, to take out his book, get started with the lesson, we would rather have him ask the teacher if he can go drink some water before he starts. So yes, the water is having him still delay the task, but it's a little bit more appropriate, right? That's fine. You can go ahead, take your break, drink some water instead of disrupting his classmates, and he'll be more receptive and ready to learn. So as a result of today, I just want to go over a little bit of our takeaways, right? What we can really learn from this situation and what we can go ahead and apply in the classroom. So I would like to end this presentation with 3 very important takeaways. So first, we have ABC helps you evaluate the situation. It helps you really see, all right, so what is going on? What context was my student in? And what did I do? What role did I play, right? So we want to make sure that we understand the motivation that way. As I mentioned, we'll have a part 2 of this series, so we'll be able to go over what those motivations are. We can name them and really understand what we can do instead, how we can turn those reds into greens. But first, we have to be able to break down and see what situation is actually happening, right? Something else that I do want you to remember too is you always have to start with a behavior that you can observe. Avoid using labels. Avoid giving a reasoning to a behavior such as, oh, he's just hungry, or he's just tired, or he is just somebody who is misbehaved, right? So this is what we do. We can work on changing behaviors. So if we can really hone in and say, okay, well, I see that he's always lazy, or I see that he's always frustrated. What does that look like? How do you know that that person is frustrated? What did you look at, right? You know your students so well. So what do they usually do? What are those behaviors that they usually engage in that you want to go ahead and change, right? And lastly, it's very important that if you learn someone's motivation, you'll be able to help change that behavior for the better. There's a reason, right, that we behave the way that we do in the situations that we're put in. So if you are somebody or if you are a child that it's really hard for you to do a math problem, or let's say it's very hard for you to work with a lot of noise around you. It's not that you are misbehaving or not taking place in the classroom because you just don't want to, right? There's some type of context, there's some type of situation there that is impeding your learning. So you as educators, it's really important to, stop and see that motivation and be able to help your students. And this is just a tool that you can use to help your students help understand why they're doing what they're doing. ABC, antecedent, behavior, and consequence. So thank you all so much for your time. As I mentioned, I'll be back for part 2. If you would like to reach out with any questions, feedback, or comments, feel free. You can contact me at jmolina.bcba@gmail.com. And this concludes today's presentation.